Hi, Megan.
Hi, Anne. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I know you're not so good. You've been sick?
Yes, I've had some insane plague flu that has been plaguing the blogging community in DC, and I'm just sort of vaguely getting over it now. My voice is still a little funny. I'm sure you can hear.
You sound okay. You should do what I do, just to hang out in this remote outpost in Madison, Wisconsin, and then no one will ever contact you, and you'll never get sick. That's my method.
Yeah, it's a thought.
Okay, so we meet at last. I feel like you and I are like blogging heads, people who are on all the time, and people are always complaining that we're on too much. And I was just on last week, so I feel like they're going to take one look and be disgusted. At me, not you. What?
They're also always complaining there aren't enough women on, so...
Balances it out. Here's an issue that I have with them is that they're always putting the women together, and they're always encouraging the women to talk about women's topics.
Yeah, shall we talk about ovaries and drapes?
How about the Madonna is on tour? Did you see that picture of her up on Drudge?
No.
Oh, apparently she has very sinewy thighs now, and people are talking about Madonna's thighs. Would that be a good topic? There's Madonna's thighs. There's the...
Well, I certainly hope that my thighs look as good as hers do when I'm at that age.
Well, people sometimes think we can see each other, and I actually can't see you. But if you're displaying your thighs, then I think that will be that'll be excellent.
My thighs are decorously hidden. I'm displaying my 2-button cardigan.
You're wearing a cardigan? Is it cold? You're in Washington, right? Right?
I'm in Washington, but I like it super hot, so I'm always it's a short sleeve sweater.
Oh, I just had a sweater on. It's very cold here. We actually had some frost up in northern Wisconsin, so
you're kidding.
Winter's
already?
Coming in. Yeah, it's
wow,
like in the
summer
50s.
really is.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. I sort of like it. Anyway, I thought that everyone would expect us to talk about Joe Biden and the Democratic Convention, which starts tonight. So, what's your take on all of that? Do you like Joe Biden as the VP pick?
I think he's kind of boring, is what I would say. I mean, in a way, I guess that's what Obama wants, right? Is to balance out his...
Because do you think that Obama is sort of boring in the way he speaks? I mean, he's sort of supposed to be exciting, but in some ways, if you think about it the wrong way, he actually becomes boring. And there's something about Biden that helps that not quite be the case?
Well, I mean, I think with Biden, of course, you always have the excitement of waiting for him to, put his foot in his mouth again.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. I find Biden, he's like the always a bridesmaid, never a bride guy. Mm-hmm. Which sort of makes me wonder if he's, I feel almost like he's like bad luck. Like on the Obama ticket, what are the odds that Obama can now actually get into office? Since Joe Biden's amazing ability to not get anywhere near the presidency has sort of astounded and amazed for more than 2 decades now. Yeah.
Well, I remember back in '88 when he ran. You're not old enough to remember '88, are you? Oh, once again, I forgot to wear my Jesse Jackson button. It's downstairs. I have a Jesse Jackson '88 button.
Wow. No, I was in high school, so I wasn't paying much. I was a freshman, I think.
Yeah.
So I wasn't paying much attention to the '88 election.
Yeah, I was just looking up there was a lot of playing of the old video of him in 1987 when he said, "I probably have a much higher IQ than you," to some guy named Frank who had asked him, kind of needled him and set him off about having gone to a less high-quality law school than Barack Obama did, the Syracuse Law School, and wanted to know his academic credentials, and he kind of got irascible and said some stupid things, like, I probably have a higher IQ than you. That was back in the days when, obviously it was before the internet, but it was at the very kind of early point of C-SPAN, following them around in that road to the White House kind of a way, and miking them, and having the video available for these really low profile political events, and Joe Biden was really the first person who kind of got snagged on that new media form of C-SPAN.
Yeah, I feel like Joe Biden is the kind of guy who probably would have done better in the pre 24-hour news cycle era.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of ways, like, he does come off as like a nice guy and sort of sweet old Uncle Ted. But I think the other thing is that Obama's biggest problem, right, is that he has this elitist, coastal snob image. And Biden doesn't really do anything to allay that, does he?
Yeah.
He's
Well,
from
one
Delaware.
thing that Biden might do is that, Biden misspeaks a lot, right? And he specifically misspoke about Obama when he said he's clean and articulate or whatever he said about him. And he also made another he also misspoke about Indian Americans in Delaware. He talked about accents in 7-Eleven stores or something like that. Remember that quote back when he was still in the running?
No, I don't remember this one.
I'll put up a link to that. He just said he's a little bit politically incorrect when he, with respect to kind of race and ethnicity things. And I think that might be seen as helpful because, a lot of people are worried that they'll say the wrong thing or that they'll be viewed as racist or something like that. And here's Joe Biden sort of talking a little bit too much, blurting things out kind of the wrong way. And Obama's picking him kind of suggests that, that sort of thing doesn't matter. You can feel a little freer about that. We're not going to be all uptight about this anymore. And maybe that's a little inviting to some of the people who felt a little uneasy about the racial issues.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Biden sort of reminds me of, there's a great P.J. O'Rourke quote taken from when he took a nation cruise to Russia, and he talked about his seatmate on the plane, and had that wonderful gift that some old people have of letting everything in their mouth, their head run right out of their mouth, with no sort of internal. And, I think you're right, that probably is good, because Obama, to a lot of people, I think, is sort of over-messaged. And comes off as being like sort of a media creation, and you certainly couldn't say that about Joe Biden.
Yeah. I was watching that old CNN clip, the one where he talks to this Frank character and says, I probably have a higher IQ than you. And in that clip, he goes on to talk about how, what Democrats need to do. I'm sorry there's like some kind of motorized gardening equipment out there. I hope it's not horrible. But he went on to talk about how what the Democrats need is not 14-point policy papers and so forth. I think the idea was, why don't you sound more intellectual? Why don't you have a lot of elaborate policies? And he talked about how what the Democrats need is someone who can do what Reagan did, which is change attitudes. And, you don't do that with lots of sort of technocratical policy papers and things like that. You do that with speech. And yet he wasn't quite able to do that himself. And I kind of thought that Obama, in a way, is the person that sort of received that message and put it to work effectively for the Democrats by doing these kinds of abstract orations that inspired people. And it's almost like picking Biden as his VP is coming full circle and kind of the fulfillment of what Biden actually talked about back in 1987 before he got ruined by saying a few wrong words.
Yeah, I think that there's a good chance that Obama is the Reagan of the Democrats, although I have to say I've been surprised by how well McCain is now polling. I mean...
Yeah, why is that happening?
I don't know. I will say that I know some people who were strong Hillary Democrats, and they're saying they're going to vote for McCain, which shocks me. I sort of wrote that off at the time as sort of like, the heat of the moment, and when they really thought about it, they would go back to the Democratic Party. And we're talking about, yellow dog Democrats here. We're not talking about, people who are sort of flipped back and forth between the parties. But they're still saying it. They still hate Obama. And, in part, I think that Obama represents the triumph of something in the Democratic Party that those people have been fighting against since '68 at least. And their feeling is that they've sort of lost, that the Netroots is finally and that the party is sort of irrevocably changed, not in a way that they like. And so I think that that's part of it. I don't know what's happening to him among the independents. I don't have a good sense. I mean, it isn't as if he's made any giant missteps.
Yeah.
It also isn't, to me, as if McCain has sort of come out with some triumphant campaign moment that should have shifted the polls this way. But,
so what do you think is it? Do you think it's the disrespecting of Hillary? Or do you think it's something Hillary is somehow actually causing to happen, Hillary and Bill?
Maybe. I think that Hillary and Bill don't want Obama to lose, if nothing else, because if they do, sort of their name will be mud in the party. their day is already over. They can't get it back by having Obama lose. All that will happen is that people will say, she dragged out the primary too long. McCain was able to start campaigning while Obama was still fighting Hillary, and that, if McCain wins, that narrative is going to get a lot of traction, and it's not going to do the Clintons any good to be the people who, after 8 years of Bush and a war that hasn't gone so well, and the economy in the toilet, nonetheless managed to push the elections to the Republicans. I don't think that that's going to improve the Clintons' standing in the party.
You think she's better off if he wins, but if he wins, he goes on for 8 years, she'll never be president. Isn't she actually better off if he loses?
I don't think she'll ever be president. I think that she had her shot, and that was it.
You don't think if he loses, she'll be able to say,
because
you made the mistake, you should have picked me, or everyone will realize that. She won't come right out and say it, but she'll be immediately running for 2012, and she'll be in the best position. Isn't she better off if he loses?
I don't know, because I think that, it sort of depends on why the mistake... If Obama were to make a major misstep, if people were to feel that, whatever, he got caught in bed with an intern or whatever, then certainly that would be the narrative and she'd be in a great position. But if it's just that he sort of doesn't quite win, I don't think that does her any good. So I think that if Obama sort of screws up, then yes, indeed, she's in a good position. But if it's just that he sort of, gets edged out by McCain, first of all, I don't feel like Hillary would be a much more effective campaigner against McCain than Obama is. But also, there's going to be his supporters don't like her any more than hers like him. And there's going to be a tremendous amount of anger from people who feel like she's going to have a hard time raising money in 2012. If they feel like she cost the Democrats the election in 2008, which I think will definitely be the narrative. Even if she could get kind of the grassroots support, who the hell is going to give this woman money? I mean, you look at how much of sort of the fundraising energy and the grassroots energy is now in the netroots. I don't see it.
Yeah. Now, are you still there? I'm listening. Now, are you going to watch the convention? Are you going to watch the convention? Are you going to live blog and do all that sort of thing?
I'll watch a little bit of it, but, these things are they're kabuki rituals now.
Yeah.
I'll tune into some of the more interesting speeches, but frankly, after Catherine Sebelius, after her performance of the State of the Union, I'm certainly not tuning in for her talk.
Yeah.
She sort of looked like a late model Cylon, early model Cylon, rather.
But what about just for blogging? In 2004, I made a point of just simul blogging, live blogging, sitting there with C-SPAN, everything that went on at the convention. And I sort of think that as a blogger, you can, so that other people don't have to watch, you watch it for them. You can get some good blogging in there, just for the sake of the bloggers.
Public service.
Yeah. Yeah, but also you can be funny, and you can, you can be a substitute for watching. I sort of feel obligated to do that because I've done it in the past, and I've done it with other things like that. But I don't know if I can bear to do it this time. Do you think there's some maybe tips for people who want to watch and don't want to be bored out of their skulls? What to look for?
Alcohol. Lots and lots of alcohol. I had a weird thing. My grandfather died right in the middle of the Republican convention last year, so I missed blogging it. And so I just didn't end up convention blogging because of that much. I actually think that the way to watch these conventions is with a fair amount of alcohol and some like-minded friends.
You and I both get criticized a lot by people on the web in a sort of a similar way. And I don't know about you, but the thing that I get maybe not more than anything else, because I also get, I'm crazy, but I get people calling me a drunk and talking about me drinking all the time. So there's this internet meme about me that I'm just a big drunk, and I can't do anything about it. But
have a drink.
Yeah. I've occasionally done a little vlog sort of a thing where I have a glass of wine, and you could see me hold it or maybe sip it. So if I were to noticeably blog with any kind of a liquor component, it would just kind of re-inflame this meme. But I can't control it anyway, so maybe I should just go ahead and do that.
Yeah, don't give in to the haters. No, I think, honestly, like, I watched most of the primaries. You know, all the bloggers in D.C. tend to sort of go to each other's houses and blog from there.
Oh, that's nice. The bloggers all live together in Washington, don't they?
Well, we don't all live together. We live, I mean, you know, D.C.'s a really small town. Like, it's just physically small in terms of where sort of young professional people live. Mm-hmm. There's basically, like, a few areas in Northwest and one area around Capitol Hill. Mm-hmm. And then, like, there's some sort of tendrils spreading out into other places, but there's really not that many places to go. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty easy to get to other people's houses. I blogged a lot from Matt Iglesias' house, which is 3 blocks from mine.
Well, that sounds great. I like this sort of image of all the Washington bloggers hanging out together. Now I'm feeling sad about being stranded up here in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's just like it's like one big party. You know, the kind of I actually remember shortly after I moved to DC. I went out to I went to meet some friends. A bunch of the bloggers had gone to a movie, and I was at a dinner party, and I met up with them afterwards. It was like midnight, and I walked into this bar down at Gallery Place, and I saw Ezra Klein, who I hadn't seen in a while, and I walked up and I said, "Oh, Ezra, how are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, come talk to me." And so we sat down at like a little corner table, and I said, "So what's up?" And he's like, "You know, I really think I'm starting to like guest worker programs." And I thought, oh my God, like
starting to like what?
Guest worker programs.
Oh,
it's like, Ezra, you're 22. You're not supposed. But that is DC. I mean, it's like
wonky.
You go to a party and it looks superficially like any other party, but then you realize that everyone there is avidly like, instead of talking about sports or shoes or whatever, they're all talking about healthcare policy and cloture rules.
Well, that's kind of cute, nerdy. I like the nerdy young people. That's nice, isn't it?
I think DC, you know, DC was looking for a slogan a while back, and Matt Iglesias submitted, did not win, sadly, but DC, I moved here for work. So it's basically like an entire city full of people who were geeks in high school.
That's nice. I think it's sweet. You know,
I'm a fan. But
well,
from which you can you know, derive what you like about my social status.
I'm sure it's not like mine out here, but I'm old and I'm in Madison. We used to have at various times had like a group of bloggers who would kind of meet over this blogging interest, but it wasn't political at all. Nobody else wanted to be political. You know, law professors and the like. You know, a lot of them don't want to really get caught up in the political stuff. It's too dangerous.
That sort of surprises me, actually. I mean, isn't the law inherently political?
Oh, yeah, but if you want to be powerful, you have to pretend that it's not. So that if you openly... No, some people have a scholarly bent that has to do with showing how it's political, but it shouldn't be that you're a political ideologue trying to use law to achieve your goals. You're criticizing other people for achieving their goals through law. That would be something you might say, but you would want to preserve your stature as a scholar. If you turn into some kind of a political commentator, you might have trouble doing that. So people trying to preserve their scholarly capital might not want to do that, whereas I've thrown all caution to the winds. But it's hard to get other people to do that. and my experience is not necessarily a good example, because I've gotten into no end of trouble. Which reminds me, you want to talk about Edwards and sex?
Sure.
Other ways of getting into trouble. What?
I always love talking about political scandals.
Is it crazy to be talking about him? Isn't he so much out of the picture? I mean, once he's been besmirched enough that Obama won't appoint him to anything, shouldn't we just let the poor man skulk back into the shadows and have a nice life with however he's managed to arrange it? What do we even care?
I don't. Like, honestly, I didn't care when the story came out. My feeling was that this is such a tragedy for Elizabeth. You know, you know, I suspect that the story that they put out about her having known last year is not true. But even if it was, you know, this woman is dying. Yeah. And she's got maybe a couple of years left to live, and this is how she has to spend it.
But now, didn't she know, and didn't she, or I'm not sure whether she knew, but didn't she encourage him to go through with this run for the presidency, which drew attention to him, cut some of the ground underneath either Obama or Hillary or something, skewed whatever the outcomes were? but she knew that this was in the background, that this would eventually come out. So, I mean, she didn't have to do that. I mean, wasn't she, or was she just supposed to be viewed as a silent, didn't know what was going on and was innocent?
Well, the story that the campaign has put out is that she knew, but I'm skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of deeply skeptical that she in fact knew. It just
well, if she knew, why didn't she tell him, he can't do this and expose her to this pain because it will come out in the end? Why did she? Well, she must have really wanted him to win, or she must have been up for all of that. Well, what do you think? I mean, I can't figure out. I mean, if I was writing a roman à clé about him, I think she would be a very interesting character. What was she really thinking? What were her goals? Or do you think it's just impolite and bad to talk about that since she is ill?
If it were me, I would not want to spend, the last few years of my life, or any significant portion of that, on a futile campaign, which is what this essentially was, right? I mean,
it's like a vanity campaign. In other words, it's a vanity campaign. It's
right.
narcissistic.
And so I think that he probably didn't tell her because, what's he going to tell her? I'm withdrawing from the presidential race because I had an affair with this woman and now she has a baby. That seems, it seems unlikely that he told her. I can't imagine that she would have authorized it if he had because, in fact, it was going to come out and there was no way that this campaign was going to be successful.
Yeah.
And why the hell would you waste that enormous energy and take all that time away from your family unless you thought you could win.
So the point is, it's so hard to understand why she would have done that the only rational inference is that she didn't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's part of a broader phenomenon, though, which is these sort of non-scandal scandals that have been all summer. It's, it's like a slow news month, and so we've got McCain's houses and, John Edwards, sexual peccadillos and so forth, and we don't really have. There's been no sort of, or very little sort of policy meat for the last month and a half.
Yeah, it's officially the silly season supposedly, and yet Obama has lost so much ground during this period that it's not just idle distractions because something is happening, and it's laying the groundwork for this serious stuff that will come later. Right. So what really has gone on there? I can't think that the Edwards thing has hurt him. Yeah,
no, I'm totally mystified by what's happened. And in a way, I mean, the weird thing about being in D.C. is that sort of 99% of the time you're way too deep into these sort of political machinations, and you can't sort of swing a cat without hitting someone who wants to tell you all about the latest polling data. But right now, Washington, because Congress is out, Washington is deserted. It's everyone has been sort of frolicking through the bars in Northwest because they're absolutely empty and you can get sort of seats on these normally crowded, beautiful roof decks and so forth. So everyone I know at least has been going out drinking, trying to take advantage of it.
Well, that's a little blind, isn't it? I mean, in the rest of the country, we're not perceiving that. We're still following the news. We're still having our opinion shaped. The people in Washington can't imagine that because they're on vacation, they're out of town, that nothing is going on in the minds of the voters. I think our attitudes are being framed and shaped a lot now, and it affected Obama negatively. So what happened?
I think it has, but I don't have a good sense. I don't have that sense of that I would normally have in D.C. of having heard 97 different possible explanations for it and it all being dissected and so forth. It's very quiet here, and so I feel kind of cut off from the.
But here's your big opportunity to make up a whole lot of stuff, and there's not enough people talking about it.
Well, I think David Icke is right, and it is the reptile men, the secret reptile men. Bill Clinton is one, who's actually a reptile, shape-shifting reptile, who rules the world. The royal family of England is.
Yeah. Do you ever listen to the podcast Skeptoid?
No.
It's one of my favorite podcasts. I'll put up a link to it, and Brian Dunning will appreciate this. I don't know him, but he does this great podcast Skeptoid and has a webpage and stuff like that. And one of them is about that reptile theory. Every week he does a little 10-minute thing where he debunks some ridiculous thing that people think, and one of them is that reptile
Are you
theory.
calling my theory ridiculous, Anne?
Well, it's a theory that I can't remember.
It's not traditional.
You
just can't think outside of your little box.
Well, what did you think of
Clintons are lizard people, and they're punishing Obama.
Well, I know that Bigfoot is real because I saw that carcass, that frozen carcass. Did you see?
Right.
You see that picture?
See?
Yeah. So
lizard people.
So
That's
I think the lizard people thing might be true. Bill is pretty extraordinary. Well, what did you think of that real estate story? That thing with Do you think that was anything that McCain didn't want to say? He doesn't know the ownership of various real estate that they have for investments or to house elderly aunts or whatever it is, and he just mumbled something about getting the information, and it's been blown up into. Well, do you think it was effectively blown up?
Yes. I mean, I think yes and no. Everyone knows he's rich.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like the fact that his wife is rich is some sort of big secret.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also, I mean, it hurt John Kerry more in a way, right? Because John Kerry is supposed to be fighting against the interests of the wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to trust someone who on the one hand says that he's fighting against the interests of the wealthy and on the other hand has a wife who pays almost no taxes because while he's making the laws to take the money, she's finding ways to get around the laws he's just written. And that's not McCain, right? Like, McCain is Republican, and so it just hurts you less to be a rich Republican. The other fact is that all of these guys are rich.
Yeah.
They're all wealthy. You don't, by the time you've gotten to the point where you can run for the presidency, you've got a fair amount of cash stashed away one way or the other.
Well, shouldn't a successful person achieve some level of wealth? I mean, wouldn't you be suspicious of the competence of a person that wasn't able to get
Well, I'm a journalist, and we never have any money, so...
Well, I mean,
but
do you think that
professions,
voters, that Americans really are hostile to the rich and that saying that, look how rich this man is, he's out of touch, that argument is effective with Americans? Or do you think that most Americans basically like to think that they could get rich too and that there's nothing wrong with being rich and seeing a rich person kind of is not something that makes them jealous or hateful, but makes them think, well, some people get rich, and I want to get rich too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's just much less envy in general which is why the estate tax plays well, right? Like why do the Republicans do well with the estate tax? It's almost no one. And part of it is that people are misunderstand the incidents, but even when they do understand it, they don't support it. The fact is, like, people in general. They sort of think of themselves as wanting to possibly be rich someday. They don't particularly...
Yeah.
I do think that too, McCain, it did make him seem out of touch. But McCain kind of comes across as out of touch the way, like, your grandfather's out of touch. He's never really been in the supermarket because grandma does that.
Yeah.
And he doesn't like this internet business.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Like,
but these are data points in a picture of him as an old man. Not so much that he is rich, but that he's old.
But you know what? I don't think old is hurting him. In fact, he seems kind of like safe and steady and stable, and you know what you get. And he's all about good old fashioned American values, and he'll lecture you about the Truman years, and then he'll give you a lollipop, and you can go to the store. So, in fact, like, I don't know that that's actually hurting him. I mean, I doubt that that's the way that McCain wants to see himself. I think McCain still sees himself as it's sort of like, it's perpetually 1964, and he's still, like, at the Air Force Academy chasing skirts. But I don't necessarily know that image is hurting him among the public.
Well, I think people think McCain is too old and Obama is too young.
Yeah.
You got to go one direction or the other. Now, Obama's got Biden by his side, so it's like he's brought his dad to represent him and be there for him. Do you think there's a father figure kind of image there with Obama, that he's the father he never had and that sort of thing? Dreams of from my father.
Maybe. I'm not sure. It's something I'd have to think about. I think Biden gives him a little bit of gravitas, but not quite as much as you might want.
Because there's something sort of goofy and freewheeling about Biden that doesn't really seem to be that kind of stability of age that you were talking about. Yeah.
He's kind of like your goofy uncle, I think, more than like your dad.
Yeah. It kind of fits the who would you most like to have a beer with theory of voting.
Yeah, I think actually, I'm not sure who wins that, really. I think maybe McCain.
Really?
I don't think I would like to have a beer with McCain, but, who knows? I've never met the guy, and perhaps he's a real charmer.
I think he seems reasonably. They all seem reasonably friendly. There's nobody. But there is this meme about McCain being cranky. I think that everyone's waiting for him to act cranky about something. But I'll get back to you about my number of houses is as close as they could get. Now, did you want to? Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to change the subject. So if you want to get in on this.
Well, I was going to say that I think the thing about McCain is that he's sort of got this persona down, like where he gets cranky and then he apologizes and sends flowers, and you just forgive it. So, which is how he's gotten on so well with the media for as long as he has. Mm-hmm. So, I'm not even sure that would hurt him. But what did you want to change the subject to?
I thought you wanted to talk a little about religion in politics.
Sure. I mean, I think that there's this meme been going around because of the
Saddleback? No.
The megachurch pastor who had this...
Rick Warren.
Rick Warren, who had this event for the candidates. Sorry, my head's still a little foggy.
It was called the Saddleback...
I'm 3 weeks on this ridiculous flu.
It was called the Saddleback Civil Forum, and it was a week ago Saturday. A week before last Saturday.
And, a lot of people reacted badly to the notion of having a religious figure sort of getting that deeply involved in politics, getting people on and talking.
Or having an event in a church. Or I guess it wasn't. I guess it was in an auditorium within the church. It wasn't the same room where they do the services, so it wasn't quite like this is where we worship and now we'll bring in the political figures. But it was in the building.
But still, and that kind of surprises me because like all the candidates in New York, certainly like the historically they go around to the black churches. Mm-hmm. You don't want to miss a Sunday.
Yeah.
And I actually like I was raised in good Upper West Side vaguely religious fashion. I was one of those like good liberal kids whose parents thought it was important for me to go to church and get some values, but they weren't.
So there was a Catholic church?
Values.
Was it Catholic?
I went everywhere. I was an Episcopalian for a while. I was a Baptist for a while.
Oh, you're like
not
McCain.
Southern Baptist.
The old Episcopalian to Baptist transition.
Well, no. See, we were American Baptist, which is kind of like being a Unitarian, except without all the dogmatic theology. It was like I used to go to Sunday school there, and it took me years to figure out that the hymns that we sang were about Jesus because you never mentioned Jesus or God directly in case it offended someone. Like I was sent off to. Sometimes I went off with Catholic friends. I went everywhere. Greek Orthodox. I think I went to synagogue more than once. Like my parents just thought I should go somewhere, but not very consistently, and there were long gaps in that. So, and I'm not religious now. So you would think that I would be the person like out there crusading for saying that you should absolutely separate sort of your politics and your religion. And in fact, Andrew Sullivan, my colleague, had on his blog a lengthy diatribe against the notion that when Rick Warren said you can't separate your faith from your politics, he freaked out. And I think that that's just not possible, right? Like,
I would think that your background would actually be something that would be consistent with being more tolerant, accepting some of the mixing because, you were exposed to a lot of different religions and then you didn't take it maybe that seriously. It was a little bit light. And so there was a kind of an easygoing mixture between religious and not religious things, where if you were really very seriously religious, as I assume Andrew Sullivan is, very Catholic, it's this really important, weighty thing that's very different from public life. And the idea of keeping that separate and making that different and holy and sacred, that there's a tradition in separation of church and state that is about separating church and state precisely to keep religion truly religious and not to ruin it with the affairs of the world. So I can understand the strong separation position going along with Andrew Sullivan and people who are strong and genuinely religious in the less liberal forms of religion, and that you would be the one that would accept the more easygoing mixture of the two.
I'm not sure that works though, right? Like, I mean, I think that there's different ways in which you mix religion and state. Now, for example, like, I am 100% ardently against posting the Ten Commandments in school. I think under God should be taken out of the pledge. I think that intelligent design is or certainly creationism is stupid. The battles over evolution are kind of illegitimate in a way. But
would you accept a biology teacher reaching out to the religious students in the class and saying some words that were intended to be respectful of the things that they were taught in their religion, just to make it easier for them to feel accommodated in the classroom? Or do you think there should be none of that? Just teach them evolution. That's the theory. That's the scientific theory. Deal with it, and religion, get it outside of the classroom.
Yeah, I don't think there is, I think that often, I don't think that there is a need to disrespect those students in a way that, in fact, like, I think some of the more ardent separationists actually want them to be actively disrespected. They actively want someone to say, no, you're a fucking moron. Sorry, did I just say that word on camera?
I thought you were blocking it first.
They want biology teachers to say, to basically tell these people that their religious beliefs are incorrect and that this is the correct thing. I'm okay with religious parents pulling their kids out of biology class if they don't want their kids to learn about evolution. Or geology, for that matter. That said, no, I mean, like, what would you say? I think it's fine if he says, like, look, other people do not accept this because they think it conflicts with Genesis. Like, nonetheless, Genesis is not going to be able to test. This is.
I think a few words of respect for religion and understanding of the cultural tradition would fit nicely in the classroom and would be a good thing, would help students learn better. And then I would also just encourage students to think scientifically. And I don't think it's necessary to beat them over the head with the idea that evolution is true and you must believe this or you're an idiot. I think it would be better to encourage people to think scientifically and judge from the evidence. And that is the scientific method. And then the evolution theory should win because it is persuasive. So let people be persuaded by the evidence and teach critical thinking, teach the scientific method, and do that alongside of religion. Religion is about believing, so believe what you're inclined to believe based on what's been put before you. I think you can have science and religion together like that, and that science is actually more likely to win than if you just really just come down really hard on people and tell them they must be scientific and they're fools if they don't believe this, which I think is the way religion talks to people, right? The fool says in his heart there is no God. You're a fool if you don't think there's a God. Things like that. That's sort of a way of teaching religion. So I actually think it's more scientific to persuade and to teach people to think critically. And I think that would accommodate religion in the classroom.
I'm not that obsessed with evolution precisely because most of the people that I know who believe in evolution believe it in exactly the same way that creationists believe in creationism. Which is that, like, their teacher told them it's so.
Exactly, yeah.
And therefore they know that anyone who disagrees with their parents, their teachers, and all their friends are morons.
Right.
They don't grok the scientific method. They don't care about it. Like, they don't apply it in any other venue in their life. They get resentful if you try to apply the scientific method in a way that contradicts something that they want to believe, or a social belief that that forces them to like argue with their friends or their family or whatever. So in fact, like, how important is it that someone believe in evolution that way rather than creationism? I don't think very important.
Right, and if you go by what is effective in a person's life, believing in the religion that the people around them believe in, and believing in the things about religion that make you feel happier and more able to function in the world, that's more effective for you. So, I mean, in a way you could say it's scientific to believe those things because it works in your life. And you don't really need to evolution, if it happens on its own, it's not something you have to do. So what do you really have to do with your life? Religion may be more useful to you than science.
I mean, I just don't think that, like, my thing is, though, that you can't have, I don't think that you can have the teacher up there saying, like, giving respect to Genesis and not giving respect to the various other creation stories that their students may believe in. I think that goes into establishment.
Right, yeah, and I teach a course in religion in the Constitution, and what you're talking about is the problem of sect preference, that if you're going to mix religion and if you're going to put religion in this public context, in the public schools, then you have the problem of preferring one religion over the other. That's a worse offense than including religion at all, is including a particular religion and favoring the one religion. So that's that point. That's important.
But, I think that more broadly, I think there are ways that you can't mix religion in the public, right? Like, it doesn't do me... I think it is both illegitimate and completely ineffective for a politician to come to me and say, well, we can't have gay marriage. And when I say why, they say, well, because, look at the second letter of Paul to the Corinthians. Like, this is not useful to me. I'm very fond of the Bible, but I don't...
This point about religion in public discourse is that a lot of people have pointed that very idea, which is there's just no currency with that idea. If the other person doesn't share your belief, then what you're saying doesn't even make any sense. There's no possibility of interchange, because there's this fundamental thing which you either have or you don't have, and if you don't have it, the argument means nothing. So therefore, everyone should secularize their arguments so that we have a common language. But the problem with that is there are an awful lot of people who really do think through their religion all the time. And you're saying to these people, and these may not be the most glib people in the world or even the most educated people in the world, you're saying to them, no, the way you speak normally is not acceptable in public discourse. You're going to have to translate it into secular talk in order to be able to talk. And it's a really kind of a way of silencing and suppressing them, because they're not going to be able to do that. So I think a little tolerance of some religion in the discourse is necessary to enable just a broader range of people to be able to talk. And if you talk about anything that has to do with ethics or morality, a religious person is going to have some religion in that. And to tell them they can't argue unless they can get the religion out of it is to put them through a kind of a torturous exercise that they may not even be able to do, and that they may be offended by being asked to do.
I don't think that, I don't have a problem with them arguing that way. It's just that it's completely unpersuasive to me.
Yeah.
The dialogue has stopped. The minute you say, well, we have to do this because Jesus said so.
Yeah.
I totally respect your religious belief, and maybe you're right and I'm wrong. But in fact, I don't believe that, I don't believe in the risen Christ, who's the Son of God, and therefore it doesn't help me for you to say Jesus said so. I can't, that doesn't advance the argument at all.
Well, I think that, go ahead, sorry.
But nonetheless, I think that where Andrew Sullivan and I differ, is that I don't even understand the idea that there's an omnipotent God who has a plan for humanity and set out all of these various laws by which we should live, and indeed created the entire concept of good. I don't understand believing that and then saying, well, but of course you wouldn't take anything that he said and apply it to politics.
Yeah,
that makes no sense to me. If you believe that Jesus is the risen Lord, etc., and that Jesus said X, Y, or Z, and there's really no, and that it's one of those things that you can't argue with. Right, it's very clear what the message was, etc. Why on earth wouldn't you vote on that?
Yeah,
that doesn't even make sense to me to say.
Well,
it seems
you should. I think obviously, if you believe, for example, that you should help the poor or you shouldn't fight in a war, things like that could come from religion, and then it becomes a secular policy, but you have a religious motivation for it. The problem is, how do you talk to other people about it if they don't share your religion? And I just wanted to say that I thought that Rick Warren really did an excellent job of modeling how that should be done, and that he's the new generation of these evangelical political figures. He did a fantastic... I know you didn't watch the forum, the Saddleback Forum, but he did a fantastic job of framing questions that come from the heart of a religious person and that are understood by the religious people in the audience to involve those religious values, but that don't really ask the question in the religious form. There's some religion in it, but not but not to the point where there isn't that currency, that shared language. So I think I recommend that forum as something that really worked in that way. But I know you didn't listen to it. But for example, on issues like abortion,
I was flat on my back with the plague, unfortunately. But I'll try to go back and watch it now.
Well, you can just listen and not watch. There wasn't much going on visually, actually. But I know your voice is bad, so I didn't want to do one of these longer blogging heads. But we did have one more topic that I thought would be good for us to talk about. It's sort of like about the internet trolls, and just I think we have somewhat similar experiences in blogging where we have a lot of people who like to attack us. I know there's a blog, I guess I shouldn't get it, but I know there's a blog, Fire Megan McArdle. You know that blog.
Oh, there is. I have 2 troll blogs, yes.
Yeah, and I've had I've had things like that too. Someone imitating me and writing like a parody blog of me, and people. There's a blog where people use my name in the comments as if they're me all the time. Which I've written to them and tried to get them to stop it. They won't do it. But I think you and I get some similar internet attacks. So, and also attacks from these commenters down here on Blogging Heads. We get some similar attacks. So I thought it would be good for us to talk about that.
Sure. I mean, it when I moved to the Atlantic, it somehow unleashed some
jealousy,
some dark fury.
Yeah.
And for a while, it really did bother me. Because, I mean, no one likes to be hated, right? And then one day, I had an epiphany.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a Saturday afternoon, I was about to go on vacation, and I posted a recipe for asparagus with pasta with mushroom and tofu. And on a Saturday afternoon, about 20 people poured into my blog to write insulting, nasty things about this recipe. And people were like, this is something a 12-year-old could have thought up, and, like, that's revolting, or whatever. And I thought, all of a sudden I realized, like, I mean, these are grown men. Most of the people who write these comments, right, they're men.
Yeah. How can you tell?
There are grown men. They're adults. They were born, they went to school, and they're sitting in their bedrooms at like 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon.
In their underpants.
And thinking to themselves, oh, I'll get her.
Yeah.
I'll get her, because I'm going to make fun of this recipe. That'll show her. Like, and I just, like, how can you take them seriously? This is the sort of person I'm supposed to care about their opinion.
You just have to have this picture of this guy at his desk in his underpants.
Yes.
Thinking he's going to get you by typing in the comments.
Exactly. Like, I mean, I think it's terribly sad. The people in the New York Times article were not sad. They were... Yeah,
there was a New York Times article, we haven't referred to it yet, about internet trolls. Yeah. Which some people think was some people think it was a trick that the Times reporter was taken in, but yeah. Go on.
But some of the things, whether or not the reporter was actually taken in, some of the stuff he's reporting actually did happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And those things are evil. Mm-hmm. You don't harass a dead kid's parents? Like, what possibly?
They made fun of some child that had killed himself. I don't know why they found it funny, or the idea that you could outrageously get laughs by, mocking something like a child's death. That's a special activity. There's a whole culture of it, according to this New York Times article, that there's been some question about. But we know that they, obviously there are people who do these things, but... maybe we should cut them some slack. They need their fun, too. Is it really so bad? I mean, you talked about your epiphany, and I think that there really is this breakthrough where you realize, I can let these people do that. I don't have to let it bother me. It's sort of like people say it's a thick skin as if you're becoming insensitive and callous, but really I think it's a new feeling where you suddenly become liberated. And people can say anything they want about you, and you don't have to care about it. You're free. So that's a feeling of freedom. It's not numbness. It's a good feeling, I would say.
Well, and it actually, like, it's a good feeling, but then it's a bad feeling, because I think, like, I think I'm cool. I enjoy spending time with me. But I think about people who pour this much energy into hating me. Mm-hmm. Like, that seems... I think that's true about anyone. Like, when I started blogging, right, like, I was obsessed with Paul Krugman. And then I just sort of realized one day, like, why? Why am I wasting my energy being obsessed with, someone who doesn't know I'm alive, or if he doesn't know I'm alive, doesn't care. and upon whom I have no effect. And, it's one thing to write about people's stuff and say, well, this isn't right, and this is why I disagree, but, like, fundamentally, I think the great thing about blogging is that it's about you, and, like, explaining something and reaching other people and telling them something that they didn't know before. It's not about explaining how much you hate something.
Yeah.
And it's not just solely about, like, oh, I hate this and I also hate that, or I just hate this one person. It makes me sad that there are people who, like, something is so wrong in their lives that's what they need to feel. And more broadly, I think, of the internet, that there are people, everyone, I think, almost comes onto the internet and starts blogging with a fair amount of, like, backlog of anger, one way or the other, right? Like, you've got all this stuff, like, burning inside you.
Yeah.
And I remember when I discovered the back archives of Reason, reading the entire thing on the internet and, like, really feeling, like, righteously enraged at all of the hideous statist policies out there.
Yeah.
And so, like, I came with my own little backlog of things that irritated and enraged me. But then you kind of run out of them. Yeah. And there's two things you can do at that point.
Yeah.
You can say, okay, well, what do I actually have to affirmatively write about? Or you can go out and look for more things to make you mad. And you can stoke your anger, and you can spend a lot of time talking to other angry people and enjoying being angry. And being angry, like, is fun, right? Like, we all enjoy sitting around with our friends on Sunday afternoon and getting really righteously outraged sometimes. But as a way of life, it's fairly unsatisfying, and it certainly doesn't make you a better or happier person. It doesn't make you any more enjoyable to be around. It doesn't improve anything for anyone. It's fun. Like, every so often I go off and, like, I really enjoy, because I'm fairly good at being, like, sarcastic and bitchy and writing really, like, snarky.
Yeah.
But I kind of limit it because it's a guilty pleasure.
Yeah. It's an interesting concept that all bloggers are hate-driven and that we got our original motivation by hating something, because that's actually not true for me. I mean, I'm a lot older than you. I'm 57. And I started blogging when 4 years ago, and I was really just had a lot of pent-up just energy and need to express myself, and sort of an art. To me, it's sort of like an art project, and it's about artistic expression and doing, like, different things, inventing a new art form, looking for something to be, just anything to be interested in. Anything could be raw material. It's not about expressing anger. It's just about expressing, whatever comes up at any particular occasion, just so I can keep writing, because I love to do that. So I don't really feel hate-driven, but I think some of it is that being an older person, I'm just mellower about things like that, even though people think I'm a sort of frantic and crazed or something, but I'm not. But I think the hate-driven idea is interesting. I would like to see sort of a list of what different bloggers, what was their motivating hate behind their blog. That would be an interesting thing to know. For you, it's the statist policies, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that's it. But the other thing I wanted to say was, it seems to me that there's something about you and me in particular that makes people people have to hate something, but why is it me and you? I mean, what is it about us that is especially hate-inspiring?
I've heard two theories on this. One of them is that they're both on me.
Okay.
But, like, one of them is that I'm a woman who blogs about male topics in a female way.
Mm-hmm. That's true of me too. But that's true of me too.
Yeah,
so that's the theory.
Which is why I thought of it. Is that like, and that sort of cognitive dissonance makes it seem sort of unserious.
Yeah. But that's a really important point. That shows we should do it even more. I mean, if that's what fires people up, we should go there. Right. That's exactly what we should do.
But women, women do they tend to relate things sort of like through personal lens more than men do. Mm-hmm. I should say there are three theories. The second theory is that women are only allowed to be smart in certain ways.
Right.
Like, they're allowed to be smart because they've studied harder than men.
Yeah.
But they're not supposed to be smarter, like, just on sheer sort of analytical firepower.
Yeah.
And so when you
no
challenge,
shortcuts, right?
And they're allowed to have strong political opinions when the opinions are about virtue. Mm-hmm. When you're sort of policing people to be kinder, or to care more about humanity, or to be more pure, or whatever part of the spectrum you happen to be on. as long as you're shouting like, oh, why don't you care about female chastity, or why don't you care about babies and poor people, and why don't you want to spend more money on them? Yeah. As long as you're in that sort of position, that's fine. But what you're not allowed to do is simply say, like, look, I don't, I'm not going on my credentials. I'm not going on this. I'm just going on the fact that, like, here, I've thought about this, and here's why I think you're wrong. Good point. The third explanation, I think those are both, there's probably, like, an aspect of, and the third is simply that we're squishy. Like, you don't get mad at Michelle Malkin because she doesn't care. There's some sense that, like, I'm close enough to the line between left and right libertarian that there's more outrage. Because
you won't just take a side and stick with it, right? That, it's enraging. It's like you're hiding something. And this ties to the female thing, too. The idea that women are always doing something through passive aggression or through their feminine wiles, and they won't just come out and say what they think. You have to try to figure it out, or you're supposed to know what they already think, and it's just enraging, right?
Well, there's part of that, and I think there's also this thing of, like, first of all, like, when there's just a raving lunatic on the street, you ignore them. When a raving lunatic starts shouting obscenities at you, you don't care. When your husband does it, you feel differently. Presumably you haven't married a raving lunatic. But there's also this, like, this sense that, like, if someone holds some positions that kind of agree with you or whatever, right, it's seductive. Other people could be misled by this. Like, the good people on my side aren't going to be misled by Michelle Malkin because she's over there on the right, and we know the right is evil, and they'll never listen to her. But that if anyone gets taken in by me, right, they could be led astray off of their good. These are the theory. The fourth theory, which I think I'm bound to consider, although I'm not really in a position to evaluate, is that I'm really just a horrible person and a terrible blogger, and for the good of humanity, I should probably be shot, or at least put in a camp somewhere where I can live out a peaceful life without reproducing.
Now, on the third point, or the fourth point, I think it was the not taking a position and being in the middle. I think that it should be noted that we're both attacked from the left, right? You're not attacked from the right, you're attacked from the left. And that there's a special... isn't there a special idea that women are supposed to be liberal, they're supposed to be on the left, and so you have to get in your place and to sort of fence straddle or be in the middle. I mean, if you went all the way over and were like Michelle Malkin, it would be easy to hate you, and you'd be all encapsulated over there. But by trying to hang around in the middle and act like you're sort of left on some things, that's really outrageous. You're not, and the attack comes from the left.
And there's definitely a sense that women are supposed to be on the left, and that it is a special kind of betrayal when we're not. Especially if you used to vote Democrat. I was in my younger days on the left, and I also think that absolutely there's in a way, like, Michelle Malkin just gets totally written off because what's a woman doing over there on the right anyway? Whereas, like, I think it goes by, like, we're dangerous seductresses, Anne.
But it's sort of like if a woman does that, it's especially dangerous because, people think that a woman is getting special attention because she is a woman. Or she's sort of jumping ahead of all the better men by being a woman, and there's something wrong with that, too.
Well, I think that, it goes both ways. I'm not able to say, I certainly, like, I'm sure I get asked to write things because I'm a woman. Like, a woman doing economics is really rare. I probably wouldn't get asked to write things if I were a woman, because I'm a woman, if I were writing more about knitting. But at the same time, there are also penalties for being a woman, and it's harder to get taken seriously in many ways. And it's also extremely hard to, I think that this was a totally fair thing for Hillary to complain about. It's very hard to assert yourself as being intellectually serious and sort of in charge and not get called a bitch.
Yeah. And she actually did a pretty good job of it. She actually did a pretty good job of showing how to be a woman in politics and be feminine and do all the powerful things.
Naturally a politician. Yeah. I mean, she isn't. She's not in the same way that Al Gore isn't. She's not a natural politician. She's not naturally like a warm human being who just thrives on having gigantic crowds following her around everywhere. I think she did do a pretty good job at it. But I don't know if I can say it's an advantage or a disadvantage in the end. I think I try not to think about it because I think those sorts of things are just too hard to tease out.
And there's nothing we can do about
really
it.
Know. And on that note, I had probably better get off.
I know we hit the hour mark.
Going.
We just hit the hour mark, and your voice held up, and so it's been great talking to you.
It was great talking to you too, and don't let the trolls get you down.
You too. Okay.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.